All right, let's get to know a little bit more about Ohio State's our guy, Patrick Murphy from 24/7 Sports, covering the Ohio State Buckeyes. Patrick, good to see you again. We saw you in Vegas. You gave us a little bit about that team. We knew it was going to be talented. We knew Ohio State would be a mix in the mix for college football playoff, and if everything went right, the national championship. Well, here we are getting ready for Illinois to host the number one Buckeyes. What have you learned about this team since we saw you in Vegas?
I think a lot of it has been sort of reaffirming some of, or answering some of the questions I guess I still had when we talked at media days. You know, Julian Sand, first time starting quarterback, right? We knew we were going to get a good look at what he was week one against Texas. They have sort of slow rolled him out, especially against some of the Power Four programs. You know, he looked good against Grambling in Ohio, but it was like, what does it look like when he's playing a real defense, a real Power Four team? Against Texas, he wasn't asked to do too much, but still handled the situation of playing what was then the top ranked team in the country. And I think still, even looking back at it now, probably a good defense. Then there was the trip to Washington. How would he handle a road environment and all that type of thing? And he's passed all those questions, passed well, I would say. And then last week against Minnesota, we finally saw Ohio State really kind of open up the offense and let him kind of cook. I think the defense, we knew would be good, but what does a Matt Patricia defense look like? Well, it's been even a step up maybe from what Ohio State had a year ago in terms of the diversity and the versatility that they've shown so far this year. I mean, statistically, they're at the top or near the top in most of the key categories. And just the way it looks, if you've watched much of Ohio State, like on one play, they can be doing one thing and playing with 4 down linemen. On the next play, they've got 3 down linemen and they've dropped deeper. They're playing zone and then they're in man. You know, that they have really found a way to make, and this is the way they frame it, is make things simple for the players, but complicated for the opposing offense. And that's been successful, thus far. I think the offenses they've faced, Washington was good. Texas, obviously, a bit of a disappointment with Arch Manning. This week will be certainly another test on the road against this Luke Altmaier-led group. So, it's just, so far they've answered all the questions positively, but it's about doing it every week, right? Or at least enough weeks, as we saw last year with the Buckeyes, that you end up where you want to be at the end of the season.
Obviously, we talked about Ryan Day and how much changed for him in just the few weeks of the college football playoff. But, I mean, you got to appreciate him a little bit because I know everyone says he's got the best talent, right? Well, Texas has a lot of talent, and they've struggled out of the gates, and their transition at quarterback has not gone as smoothly as Ohio State. Penn State has a really talented roster, and look what's happening there. Mm-hmm. So what would you say about Ryan Day and just all the transition they've had with 14 NFL draft picks, quarterback gone, new coordinators on each side of the ball? What has he done well with this team throughout all that?
I think he's learned, and this really started last year, just kind of how to manage these situations. He's not calling the plays anymore. So he's not the head coach and the offensive coordinator. He's found guys, whether it be Jim Knowles the last few years or Matt Patricia this season, that he trusts to run the defense so he doesn't have to be overly involved with that. And that allows him to kind of take big picture views of things. And the big thing so far this season has been treating every week the same, regardless of who the opponent is. And they always say it's about us. And that's easy to say. And I think every team tries to do that, right? But executing it, and you and I were talking right before we started recording, like I've sort of been waiting for this team to have one of those games where, either they're looking past an opponent, like maybe last week with Minnesota coming to town for a night game. Might they be looking a little bit ahead to this trip to Illinois? Or just come out kind of flat and, maybe they win the game, but it's not the convincing win. And, I think you see that from teams all over the country. And certainly you mentioned Penn State, what happened last week out at UCLA. So they have done a really good job. And Ryan Day is at the helm of this, of keeping that focus. And I think some of it has to do with what Ryan Day learned last year and just how you navigate the course of a season. And he made it clear this offseason, like he wants to be the first Ohio State head coach to win back-to-back national championships. And I think these players, like a lot of them, despite the fact that they weren't overly experienced, were there and watched how the Buckeyes managed last season, watched some of those more veteran players. And so I think that's been helpful too, of just like, what the approach needs to be each day to get to where you want to go. And I think Ryan Day has really emphasized that. And look, does that mean the Buckeyes go undefeated? Who knows? There's going to be probably some games where they need to, where they have to get over some issues. And they've had a little bit of that, but I think there will be more of that as we go along. But so far they've managed that really well.
Patrick, you've covered some damn talented quarterbacks. Justin Fields, obviously CJ Stroud, and Howard here last year. Julian Sayin feels different than them all. What has stood out to you about, I call it playing point guard. He just seems to be playing point guard extremely well for all those talented pieces around him. What have you seen from him that's different, and how he's handled just having the job of Ohio State quarterback?
I think that's a really good way to put it. Like, he hasn't done anything outside of the offense. Even the few times he's taken off and run, like it's sort of a last resort type of thing. Like, he's trying to play well within the scheme, and they've brought him along really well. And that was a topic actually with Ryan Day this week about, with Justin Fields, you kind of had an ideal situation. He'd had a year at Georgia. He'd played a little bit. He comes in, you have a pretty good defense, but you still had to rely on him, his legs and stuff that first year. CJ Stroud, he did have a year to sit behind Justin Fields, but by the time he took over, like, he was having to put a lot on his shoulders because that defense wasn't good. Kyle McCord, similar thing. So this year you've really been able to, if you're Ryan Day, sort of bring Julian Sayin along each week, maybe load a little bit more on his plate given the opponent. And you haven't had to say, hey, go out there and win the game for us. And that's been a big thing they've talked about, is like doing whatever it takes to win the game. And that doesn't need to necessarily be Julian Sayin throwing 30, 40 times a game like it was at times with Stroud. So I think that's helped kind of allow him to settle into this role. Even though you started with the game against Texas, you go on the road in a tough environment to Washington. Now you have to obviously manage this trip as well, but he's been able to play, like I said, sort of within the system. And look, he's really talented. Mm-hmm. In terms of kind of comparing him, I think CJ Stroud's probably the closest example. They're not the same size-wise. CJ is your more prototypical size. Julian is listed at 6'1". It's right about there. But he's got a quick release. He's very accurate. Good arm. I won't say great arm strength, but certainly good enough to make the throws. He's a very good deep ball thrower. Until last week, he was 9 for 9 on throws over air yards, over 20 yards, had 2 incompletions. I think he's now 12 for 14 on the season on those passes. Doesn't help or doesn't hurt that you have those guys catching the ball. They can make plays downfield, right? But the poise, all of that, we heard about it before the season. We heard about it even when Ohio State was recruiting him before he committed to Alabama. It's been on display, and I think that's really his most, probably remarkable trait that I've seen. You expected him to be a good thrower. Ohio State quarterbacks typically are, but to kind of handle this moment, being the quarterback of the defending national championship team, but then thrown into the Texas game and going on the road at Washington. And the Washington game was really impressive to me because he never looked sped up or concerned about the crowd noise, and it was really loud there. So I think just, he's that kind of California cool, laid back, like things don't bother him too much, and he's just going to go about his business, and he knows what he needs to do to help the Buckeyes win.
Obviously, his pedigree is higher than this guy, but he reminds me, for Illinois fans, of Tommy DeVito, just size-wise. Yeah. His release is really quick. He might even have a better arm than Tommy, but just poised, calm, the way he carries himself. I really like it. So I've been really impressed with him so far. We are getting really nitpicky. That's what you have to do with a team like Ohio State, okay? Only 14 points against a great Texas defense, right? 24 points at Washington. Good, not great. So if we're picking apart an offense that has Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Bo Jackson and Max Clare, Julian Sayin, a great offensive line, what are any vulnerabilities you've seen whatsoever?
Yeah, I'd start with the run game, which has not really gotten going. They're, I think, like tied for 57th nationally in rushing yards per game. That's something that, Ryan Day's been asked about a lot, and he has said, it's been solid. He actually said that this week when someone asked about how he feels about the run game. I don't get the sense that that's how they actually feel. Like they would like to be closer to what they were a year ago with Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins. CJ Donaldson and James Peoples were kind of the expected guys to step in and replace those two. CJ Donaldson, at least as of last week, he carried the ball 3 times, all for a yard apiece. It looks like he was sort of relegated into that clear short yardage type of running back. We'll see if that continues. James Peoples, I know they love his talent. You've seen it in bits and pieces. It just hasn't quite clicked completely yet. And then Bo Jackson has kind of emerged as a freshman, a guy who just falls forward, gets you the extra yards. He's hit some big plays. He's been the one that's really carried this rushing attack this season to be even where it is. And so, like, if you're looking at the weaknesses of the offense, they haven't been able to get that going. The offensive line has been solid. I think right guard is the big question there. Tegra Shabola, he was the starter last year, but even in the college football playoff run, they rotated some at the guard positions. He, again, has been rotating with Ethan Oniano, who was actually brought in this offseason from Rice to be the starting left tackle, just didn't win the job. That's a spot where they have been good enough, like they were a year ago, but not great. And we've seen some penalties from Tegra Shabola. So that's probably on the offensive line where you can get got a little bit if you're going after Ohio State. And you mentioned Max Clare. He finally last week sort of came on a little bit in terms of being a pass catcher. He did have a touchdown a few weeks ago, but 5 catches, I think for like 63 yards last week, which was his most in a Buckeye uniform. The tight ends have been very good blockers, but they haven't had to use them yet. So I'm interested to see if that ever really becomes a thing, because we talked about it a lot in the offseason. When you have Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, maybe you just don't need those other guys. But Max Clare, Brandon Innes, the slot receiver, neither of them have really been able to do much so far this year. I think if those guys can get going too, now you have this plethora of weapons, right? So whether that is by design or not to use these guys at this point, I'm not sure. But I do think that, it hasn't been the weapon that I think many people thought.
I just listed the quarterbacks you've covered, the wide receivers, man.
Yeah.
Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka is doing ridiculous things. Why is Jeremiah Smith, is he the best receiver you've covered?
Yeah, he definitely is. And that is
no hesitation.
No. And it was funny. You're watching the NFL this week, and I think all of the Ohio State wide receivers had pretty good weeks. And then it's like, well, this next one that's coming, and they're not even talking about Carnell Tate. No. I know he had his career best game last week against Minnesota. And somebody pointed out after the game in the press box, there were 3 different mock drafts by legitimate mock drafters that didn't have Carnell Tate as a top 3 round pick. But to answer your question, Jeremiah Smith, it's just, and we talked about this a little bit in Las Vegas, it's his continued push to be better. He could have gone through last year and, been one of the best freshman wide receivers in Ohio State history and been content with just kind of going along. But no, he's worked on refining his route running. He's become a better blocker, and he's like a lot of these, a lot of those guys you named, the unselfishness of look, sometimes teams are going to take this guy away. Right. And, if you can take Jeremiah Smith away, he is okay with, hey, let Carnell Tate do his thing. Like a week ago. And I say that take away, he still had 2 touchdown catches. So, right. And then just physically, he's big, 6'3", he's just thick though. It's tough. We were wondering going into the Washington game. Now Washington had 2 corners that ended up not playing, but their cornerback room is just, 6'3", 6'4" guys that you don't see a ton. How would that affect a guy like Jeremiah who, usually can use that size? And he was still able to have success, and because of some of the refinement that he's done with his game. So, Ryan Day said after the game against Minnesota that, Carnell Tate has learned from Jeremiah Smith, which you'd think would be the other way around, given their, Carnell Tate's the older of the 2 receivers. But just, that approach, the gifts that he has, and just always wanting to be better is really impressive to me.
He's special, man. All right. The defense, you said under Matt Patricia, I think people were interested about that hire. working out pretty well so far. Of course, he's got so much talent, but they lost so much talent to the NFL, and then you just reload with all these guys. But the stats are amazing: 5 points per game, and they've played Texas and Washington. Washington's offense is pretty good. To hold them to 6 was really impressive. But they've only allowed 8 red zone opportunities, and they haven't allowed a red zone touchdown. I find that amazing. But what has made them so good after losing Sawyer, JTT, Tyleik Williams? I mean, go on and down the list. Cody Simon. What has made them so dominant?
Well, I think it's been this perfect combination of you bring in a guy like Matt Patricia, who there isn't an offense or a defensive offense he hasn't seen or a defensive scheme he hasn't used, and you then combine that with this staff that had, everyone else on the staff stayed, and they were willing to kind of open it up to him and be like, how can we improve here? How can we improve there? Sticking within the basic framework of what they want to do defensively. And then you add in the players who, Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, guys that are versatile players who had experience. And then the guys coming through like an Arvell Reese, who played some last year at linebacker, but spent some time at defensive end during his freshman year. So now you can line him up on the edge. He can rush, he can drop back. There's just a lot of versatility, and football IQ, I think, is huge for them. If you are Matt Patricia and you're trying to teach what is basically an NFL style defense to guys that don't quite get it at that level, it's probably not going to work, right? So these guys have to be able to take what they're talking about in meetings, what they're working on in practice, and implement it. One of the biggest things I think that they've done is disguising things so well that, what the quarterback is seeing as he's making his reads and checks often isn't what the defense is going to do once the ball's snapped. But then sometimes it is. And so you can't just assume they're going to do something different than what you see. And sometimes PJ Fleck was talking about this last week after the game. Ohio State came out and was pretty base defense the first drive. Minnesota drives down the field, gets into the red zone defense, which has been really good, and they rely on it, gets a stop, forces a field goal. And then when Ohio State's defense comes out, they're no longer in zone. They're playing press man pretty much the rest of the game and just kind of reading and reacting to what the offense has done. And, how do you as an offense know what's coming, I guess is the big thing. And that's why it's been tough for, Washington and Texas, we thought at the time and whatnot. And even Ohio's offense, it has been solid for a MAC team, and they were able to relatively contain that. Though that is the most points they've given up in a game is to OU at 9.
Yeah, ridiculous. All right, I'm looking at the schedule here, and I think Penn State and Michigan up and down the roster are the most talented teams up and down that Ohio State still has left. But Illinois, I think, probably is the best quarterback they will play until the college football playoff with Luke Altmaier. So what does this game mean for Ohio State, and what are their concerns, or what do they think they have to do to make sure they take care of business here?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody in the program before fall camp, I think it was, and they said to me, like, obviously the Texas, the Penn State, the Michigan game at the end of the season, they didn't say Michigan because you're not allowed to say that word around here. But it was like, if those are games that are going to have everyone's attention. The games that person brought up was that trip to Washington and this game, as like, these are going to be two teams that are probably going to, sort of fly under the radar. Maybe not Illinois. There was a lot of buzz about Illinois once fall camp began, but those are games that we're going to have to really kind of grab them by, make sure everyone is on point, because they aren't the historical names, I guess is the way I'd put it. So this is big. And I think the way they're viewing it is it's another test. You had week 1 against what you thought was a really good Texas team. Then you had a couple weeks where you knew you were going to win. Then you go on the road for the first time. And then you're back against a Minnesota team that had been playing some good football. And so like each week there's, aside from the Grambling State game, really, there's been something that they can use to test how this team is handling it mentally, physically, all that. And I think this is another one. You're going on the road again. It's a Big Ten game. And this is an Illinois team that is good. Ryan Day talked about it this week, saying, in my mind, this is a top 10 team. I throw out that Indiana game. We're not even watching that film because I don't think, basically called it an outlier, that He doesn't think that's what this team is. He doesn't think that that's what they're going to face on Saturday. So, whether he is trying to send a message to his team through us in the media or not, he's making it very clear that he respects this team. And, this is that next step on this team's journey of, hey, we got to go in and face another top 25 team in their house. And, are we up for the challenge?
Well, Patrick Murphy, thanks for getting us ready for this game. Ohio State, a bear, but also a huge opportunity for Illinois. Be interesting to see if Illinois can push them in this one. Patrick, thank you, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Like many of you, my wife and I, a little bit of coffee snobs. I mean, there's some nights you go to bed and you just go, man, I can't wait to wake up and have my fresh cup of coffee, right? But it's got to be a good one. And that's why my wife and I go to Columbia Street Roastery. They have freshly roasted coffee and all sorts of flavors. Try out their fall seasonal flavor coffees. They're right there at csrcoffee.com. It includes their pumpkin pie blend, which you can go check out right now. Columbia Street Roastery has a lot of different flavors, from your fall seasonal blends to your medium roast to dark roast. Go check it out at csrcoffee.com, where you can get free shipping on orders of over $45. And our listeners, you get 10% off your first order if you use code GOILLINI2025. So visit csrcoffee.com, get free shipping on over $45, and get 10% off your first order with code GOILLINI2025. Visit Columbia Street Roastery at csrcoffee.com. All right, let's talk the Illinois side of Illinois hosting number 1 Ohio State. It's been a while since Ohio State's been in Champaign. It's been a while since Illinois has hosted number 1. Joey, how are you? How's the week going?
I am good. We are in the home stretch before. I mean, look, I know the big deal is the team gets an open week and an off week, but so do you and I, or get a slower week. So we are in the home stretch to get there. No one wants to hear about our complaints, but this has been a long stretch.
I'm tired. I'm tired. And it's crossover season. It's recruiting weekend's going to be huge for Illinois football as they, take advantage of the excitement that is happening. But it's been a grind. I was talking to somebody on the staff this week, Joey, and it's been 10 weeks nonstop since the start of training camp. But end it with a bang here before they finally get an off week. Illinois is the final team, the last team in the Big Ten to get an off week. They're the only team, I think, in the Big Ten with 6 games already done. And then they get 2 and 4 weeks. So we do get to rest a little bit here coming up. But basketball season's right there. So it's not really.
Yeah, a little bit of rest. We'll be kind of grinding for this, Jeremy. We'll be all right. They have gotten into this pretty healthier than I probably thought, than you would reasonably think, playing 7 games before the first off week would get. Obviously, you got to get out of Saturday, and we'll see what happens there. But I think that's been a huge storyline through this first part, because it's gone in waves where it's like, oh my God, everyone in the secondary's hurt, or, oh my God, this is, he's hurt. And then all of a sudden it just kind of balances itself out outside of Xavier Scott. So I know I mentioned it on Saturday, but we can't overlook that, because this is a pretty impressive string of by and large being healthy with as many games before a chance to decompress a little bit and get some rest.
Yeah, you're going to have sprains, you're going to have injuries, you're going to have guys in and out of the lineup. The problem is the one injury is very, impactful. Having Xavier Scott out to a group that was already kind of a question mark a couple games into the season, to lose him certainly didn't help. But it's we're getting through the season. It's 6 games in. We're at the halfway point, and then they do get a week off to prepare for what I think is their, outside of this game, the toughest game remaining after Ohio State, which is Washington. You play a couple games, you get a week off, and then you get a chance to play the final 2 games. So it does set up pretty well for Illinois, the fact that they've gotten through this, Joey, with just the one really severe injury.
Yeah, and that means, not a lot of week-to-week injuries, right? And just that big – and I'm not trying to minimize the loss of Xavier Scott. That's probably a really good transition into our first of our 6-pack of questions here. But, yeah, I mean, this could have gone a lot differently. So I do think there's a positive to take, and just from the health standpoint.
Before we do get to the 6-pack questions, which you do every week, I do have to ask, how was the Triple Dipper? People have been asking, Joey. It has been a very popular topic of discussion.
Oh, it was wonderful. I got some boneless buffalo wings, some Southwest egg rolls, and they're basically mozzarella sticks. So it's almost like the hash brown patties. Like, they're not sticks. It's literally just like a mozzarella puck. And it was wonderful. It was Truly spectacular.
I do like the flat fried mozzarella rather than the stick form. I'm a fan of the flat.
I'll take it all. You know what? I'm not here to turn down cheese. I will take
Sweet.
all of it. It was great. It was a little bit out of the way, but at that point I was committed to going and had to get that taken care of. I woke up.
You had to stick to the bit, man. Like just going through that. I was like, I'm going to get some chicken tender somewhere on the way. And no, you're right. I have to find it. How far out of the way was it to find it?
Yeah, it was literally like 4.5 miles, which isn't a lot, but it took about 10, 15 minutes to get there. The only downer was I woke up at midnight really needing Tums. It was a rough end to it, but I would do it again. There's no doubt in my mind. I would run that back.
All right. Today is the reminder. This week is a reminder that this is a rivalry game, Joey. Illinois, Ohio State. It goes way, way back. This will be the 104th meeting between Illinois and Ohio State, the 92nd contest for maybe the best trophy Illinois plays for, the Illibuck. That's up for debate. The cannon, it broke, by the way. Did you see Jeremiah Warren picked it up and it
sure did. I would also like to see the cannon a little bit bigger.
Yes, it's a really unimpressive cannon.
Put it on wheels if you can. Let's just wheel out a whole cannon.
Just
park it outside your facility if you have it.
Yeah, just bring it behind the big drum that Purdue wheels around all the time. So yeah, I would mark the cannon last. It's just a really unimpressive trophy when you see it. The hat's pretty cool. I am a fan of the hat. I thought that was a good pivot. But the Illibuck, it would have been cooler if it was an actual still live turtle, but that only lasted for a couple years. So it is a rivalry game, but it hasn't been much of a rivalry. And I don't know where Illinois ranks on the list of Ohio State rivals, but it's pretty far down there in the modern era. And I don't even think Illinois considers this a rivalry game, but there is a trophy. So Illinois trying to get it for the first time since 2007 when Illinois, Jay Lehman, Juice Williams, Regis Ben, Richard Mendenhall, and the crew beat number 1 Ohio State in Columbus.
Yeah, I wish that because it is such a great trophy. I wish that was for a rivalry that was a little bit, one, more regular, and two, more evened out. Ohio State doesn't have a lot of evened out rivalries. Michigan, of course, obviously. But for the most part, that's a program that's on the very right side of a lot of rivalries.
Yeah, obviously the most talented team Illinois will play all year, maybe the most talented team in the country. I was just listening to Dane Brugger's latest on the Athletic Football Show, and they were going through the top 3 at every position. I kept hearing Ohio State guys. Carnell Tate at wide receiver. They brought up Jeremiah Smith, even though he's not eligible, just because he's so good. On the defensive front, Arvell Reese, their linebacker, who kind of plays like Micah Parsons. Sonny Styles was their 3rd-rated linebacker with Reese number 1. Caleb Downs, their number 1 safety. So probably a handful or a couple handfuls of first-round draft picks, definitely top 50 picks on this team, and just 4 and 5 stars up and down the roster. But before we really dive into the Ohio State side, I do want to break down kind of the midway point here, Joey, of the season. I think the first 2 questions will kind of hearken on that. Number 1 in our 6-pack of questions, what position group needs to step up most during the back half of the season here?
Boy, I feel like this answer has changed in the last 2 weeks. I don't know about you. I think it's the defensive backs. And you're dealt a tough hand without Xavier Scott, who, 1, is very, very talented. And 2, I think more and more you see the glue factor that he had from a communication standpoint with that secondary. We can talk about his versatility. We can talk about his skills. There was a lot of trust, a lot of continuity with that. So, that hurts, obviously, losing Xavier Scott. But those defensive backs have just been, and that's not just corners, it's more recently safeties too, just been too inconsistent this season, especially with what you're asking them to do, which is, hey, keep the ball in front of you, bring down the ball carrier, live for another down. That's more or less what they're trying to do defensively. And you're just seeing coverage busts that are, you really wouldn't expect. You've seen the missed tackles, which I think is just a huge, huge deal. This is a veteran secondary. Obviously, Tanner Heckel is a new face in there. He's not somebody you look at as a guy who's had a ton of coverage busts, a guy who's had a ton of missed tackles. He's not been perfect, but he's not kind of the first guy that comes to mind, even though he's really the youngest player in this secondary. This group has to be very, very sound for it to be successful. And that's not sexy, but sound can get the job done. We've seen that work for Illinois. I do think the return of Jaheim Clark is a huge deal, like an absolutely huge deal. So one, they need to step up and just being more fundamentally sound, don't having those breakdowns. But can they also take a step where Aaron Henry feels a little bit more comfortable running some man-to-man? Because if that is a step that I think could really have some big tangible differences on this defense. If you trust Jaheim Clark, and I think Torrey Cox opposite of him, to run that man-to-man, get some more pressure, be advantageous in the times and that you blitz, and can you disguise a little more? I've actually not been feeling great about the disguising because I feel like there's just a lot of movement and it gives some of those open zones. So 2 weeks ago, Jeremy, you and I are probably in agreement talking about the offensive line. And I don't want to pretend like that's been a perfect unit over the last few weeks, but the secondary, man, when a mistake goes bad there, it is really, really, really eye-opening. And that's just the nature of the position.
I do want to sit here and acknowledge Illinois has gone up against some of the best offenses in the country. Like Duke is putting up insane numbers right now as they get to the ACC. And I know they move the ball really at will at times against Illinois, and Illinois gave up some big plays, but you're able to get some of the takeaways. ESPN's S&P Plus, which I love their metrics efficiency-wise, number 29 offense is Duke. Ohio State is number 8. Indiana is number 7. USC is number 1. Right? So they have gone up against some of the best offenses in the country. It's going to lean out here a little bit. Washington is very good at 24. Maryland at 63. Rutgers, Joey, 22 right now. But Wisconsin's 93rd. Northwestern's 101st. So I do think they'll look a little bit better here, especially in those final 4 games. But this is the Big Ten. And right now, you say defensive backs. I think it's got to be safety. You need maybe it was just one bad game last week against Purdue, but I still feel like you need more from your veteran safeties. You need more big plays from Miles Scott and Matthew Bailey, and you just need more reliability. The missed tackles by Matthew Bailey last week, a blown coverage between those two safeties, that's not supposed to happen. And the way you are playing defense, it can't happen. So your safety play has to improve. I will say the other one I will go to, Joey, I still think the offensive line has to step up. They usually do in the back half of the season. And I do think they're going to have opportunities in the back half of the season to really step up. Rutgers, Wisconsin, Northwestern, their defenses aren't great. Maryland has been good so far, but their schedule is going to get a little tougher here. I think you're going to have some opportunities to really run the ball. I've actually been, I guess, encouraged a little bit the last couple of weeks of pass protection. I thought Purdue, it was really good. USC, it was great. So I'm very encouraged by where the pass protection is going. I'd still like to see the run blocking get better. I'd still like the run blocking to be a little bit more competitive. What I saw against USC was great. Purdue wasn't as clean. Not having Josh Kreutz probably had something to do with that. But I do want to see that group gain some momentum, get the ball rolling downhill a little bit more. And it starts really this week. It's going to be really, really hard. But that offensive line has to have its best game going into this week. So while I'm encouraged mostly by the last 2 weeks, Joey, that's got to continue because that's got to be a strength of this team. And they have to be the more physical team. They were against USC. Purdue, I don't know if the offensive line was, but they were really good in pass protection. They got to get that ball rolling and continue that because they've ended the season well, in large part because the offensive line has ended the season well the last 2 years.
Yeah, one thing I want to add about the offensive line, Brandon Hansen played about a dozen snaps against Purdue. We have been talking about right guard. That conversation got quieter post-Indiana, because I thought obviously the offensive line against USC was the best game we've seen them play this season, and it hadn't been particularly –
best game I'd seen Brandon Henderson play too.
Yeah, but the fact that there was a little bit of rotation against Purdue makes me wonder. And I don't know if we'll see that this week. I don't know if we'll see it at all. But if there's usually changes, if there's positional changes, an open week, an off week, I can't say bye week because Bob Osmussen will find me and yell at me because he never calls it an off week. That's usually where you see some of those more significant tweaks because you've got more time to iron out some of that stuff. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but the fact that there was a rotation again against Purdue is enough to look at and say, okay, why was this? Is this something that's a trend or is this matchup dependent? But I do think we have to acknowledge that even though the USC game was an encouraging game, there's still been rotation, and that's something you've just got to monitor.
Yeah, and if you want more physicality, because I think sometimes Brandon Henderson is he bringing that every play? Because I think he's a really good athlete. I'd still like him to get a little quicker, but Brandon Hansen was recruited to be that big physical guy. The other guy I'm just really intrigued by is Desmond Schuster.
I'll never stop being intrigued by him. I just am.
He was so good in training camp when we saw him. When he's gotten in the game, he's looked the part, Joey. And if you want to get big and physical, put him in the game. Now, Melvin Priestley at right tackle, I don't know if you want to move him. You want to do all that change. But Schuster's played guard before, so he's another interesting guy for me down the stretch. But they got to get improved play. I think Gesky is playing his best ball. I think, Bart Miller, one of his best achievements so far has been the improvement of Josh Gesky year after year. I think J.C. Davis is playing at an all Big Ten level. Kreutz was great against USC. I think we know what he is. He's got some limitations, but he's a good player. And Priestley, I think, has had a good couple weeks here. So you need to continue that momentum. And if it includes getting some more guys at right guard, I could definitely see that.
Yeah, all those things above. And I just, from the run game in particular, I just want to see more consistency from that, because probably going to transition into the question number 2 here. But I think that's just been lacking. The pass pro, when the pass pro blows up, it's like a corner getting beat. Like you cannot miss that. You like anybody who has, you don't even have to know a lot about football. You can just see that go up in flames. The same thing that happens with the DB. The run game is a little bit more, you got to kind of peel some things and take a look there. But that's just not been consistent enough for a team that really, obviously they value running the football, but I thought they felt pretty good coming into the year about their ability to run.
I totally misjudged. I thought they were going to be a much stronger running football team because of their offensive line, because of the running backs that they had, because of Luke Altmaier's threat to throw. But if you have a good running attack, Luke Altmaier is basically unguardable, right? Like this passing attack just becomes that much more dangerous because you're staying ahead of the sticks, and teams have to respect the run game. When you have to sit back and pass on 3rd and long, they can tee off on Luke Altmaier and make it hard for this offensive line to block. So that's why I think the offensive line's got to continue. You got one final thought before we get to that?
Yeah, it's just, that tee off, that's what you saw against Indiana. That's what you saw really in the last 17 minutes against Penn State last season. In the moments that it's really looked like, yuck, that they can't, Luke Altmaier's getting hit at a level that's not sustainable. It's when you're not ahead of the sticks. It's when you're in those obvious passing downs. And that's just not really how this offensive line was built to exist. You could really pretty much realistically argue very few offensive lines are built to exist in that down to down. But yeah, that's when it starts to look really ugly. So you've got to get that run game going and stay ahead of things.
Number 2, what emerging player intrigues you most for the back half of the season, Joey? I'll let you go with the offensive guy.
Yeah, I'm assuming my honorable mention is who you had as, if you go defense, it's Khalil Valentine. I don't know that I would have said this 2 weeks ago. 22 carries at Purdue, far outpacing Caden Fagan. Aiden Lawfrey continues to return. That's something. That's something that you have to look at and say, okay, this wasn't injury related. This is very intentional. And just as you watch Khalil Valentine over the course of his first 18 games, there just always seems to be a little bit of, whoa, it's not always perfect. And it doesn't always, like, I thought, we kind of had him as a half miss at Purdue because there are a lot of losses, or 6 losses for negative or no yards. But more times than not, he kind of jumps off the screen or off the field, or however you're consuming that game. His burst is really, really good. His vision is improving in a lot of ways. His uncle is NFL running back Joe Mixon. So if you're looking to ask about setting up blocks and that patience, guy's run for more than 7,000 yards in his career. That patience, kind of a hit and miss against Purdue, but I think you can see that really, really growing for an offensive line that hasn't blocked all that well. The dude who can make a miss in close quarters probably makes a little bit of sense there. We thought, I think the thing that I come back to is we thought coming into the year, he was probably the complement to Caden Fagan and Aiden Lawfrey. And I think 6 games in, particularly what we've seen the last few, are those two the complement to Khalil Valentine? Like, is he going to go through? There's still going to be a need for Caden Fagan, for Aiden Lawfrey, of course. But are we looking at him as the guy who is he going to lead this team in rushing attempts more times than not over these final 6 games of the season? So passes the eye test in a lot of ways, and he's still a young player. It's not going to be perfect. But I thought the fact that after that fumble against USC, that could have been disastrous. What are we talking about if that happens? To come back the next game and give him 22 carries, far and away more than anyone else, there's trust there. They trusted him as a freshman when they gave him the ball against Kansas. Now that trust is really pairing with production that we haven't seen for him at this level. So I have a hard time thinking you're not going to see a lot of that moving forward.
He had never had more than 10 carries before. He had 20.
And that was this year. That was Western Michigan this year. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know how many times he's going to get 20 carries, because I do think there's a really useful role for Caden Fagan in this offense. Sometimes I feel like we talk about these guys, it feels like we have to knock these other guys because Khalil is good and exciting. Khalil is great and exciting. He brings juice to this offense. He's one of the most explosive playmakers they have, and he doesn't need good blocking sometimes to have good runs. Now, when there's not good blocking, he's losing 4 yards when Caden might get 0. When you got to fall forward for a couple yards, he's not going to do that. Like, I still want Caden Fagan in the game when I'm inside the 10-yard line for the most part. There's been some times they've had Khalil in there, and I'm like, I don't know about this. I need some tough yards. I'd like Caden Fagan in there. So it is nice to have that short yardage option, a guy who's a little bit different. But yeah, Khalil needs 12 to 15 touches at least a game, right? Because there's that explosive element. He can just make people miss that these other running backs can't. I still think we need to remember Aiden Lawfreeze can be helpful to this team too, because he's got that breakaway speed. But Khalil, as he continues to add strength, now that he's got this vision, he's playing with a little bit more physicality. He's just got the speed and quickness that Illinois hasn't had at this position since Chase Brown. And he can make an offensive line right. If you miss one block, it's not done. Like if there's a missed block with Caden Fagan, he can churn out a couple extra yards, but he's not making that guy miss. Khalil can. And he can run for 10, 15 yards after that. So, yeah, he should be a huge part of this offense moving forward. And I think by the end of the year, has a really good chance of leading this team in rushing. Defensively.
To that point, I just want to follow up and add one more point. When we talk, especially running backs, receivers fall in that same – because you're saying Caden or Khalil Valentine is one of the most intriguing guys moving forward, that doesn't mean it's a one out, one in type thing, right? It's just you see more of an ability to spread this out between these guys, whereas 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, you're maybe thinking, okay, Aiden and Caden are and then where does Khalil, does he get 5 or 6? I just think there's the potential for a lot more balance there, but he passes the eye test. I also think that could allow maybe some swing passes, a way to get Caden Fagan outside in space, which I love. I love that idea because he's fast and he's strong, and it's going to take more than, I mean, you really got to get to him to bring him down. So I just want to reinforce what you said, that like, just because we're saying Khalil doesn't mean it's like, well, no one else is going to get any carries or it's going to be drastically diminished. I just think there's more of a balance there than we probably would have thought a month ago.
Yeah, he's turned from 5-6 a game to he needs to be 12 to 15 a game.
Yeah.
So maybe that comes at the expense of Lawfrey, a few at the expense of Fagan. I still think Fagan needs 10-plus touches a game, and I think Lawfrey is going to get in the game at times as long as he is healthy. But he needs to be healthy, and sounds like he just hasn't been good enough to go the last couple of weeks in a big role. So we'll see if he's available against Ohio State. But it's good that you got 3 of them that you know can produce at this level when the offensive line is doing its job. But Khalil's vision right now is probably the best of these backs, and his decisiveness is good. It just, he still needs about 10, 15 pounds in the offseason. Once he does that, man, I think he's an NFL running back. All right, defensively, the good thing is, despite the deficiencies of this defense, there are some emerging players here. So I wanted to say, like, Angelo McCollum, you could pick him, one of my sign guys. JoJo Hayden, you could pick him, one of my sign guys, Joe. It's just, they're adding a little bit different element. Like Angelo McCollum can get some interior pressure. I think he's the best at that. And Tommy was up there, but Angelo McCollum at that nose guard spot can really get some pressure. JoJo's just bigger. I think between the tackles, he's physical, he's athletic. I just really like what I've seen from him. But it is Jaheim Clark, right? Like, adding this guy, this is why we were so high him in the offseason. I had him as one of our breakout candidates. He's long, he's athletic, he's tenacious. I hate saying it because it's his nickname, but he brings juice to a secondary that just doesn't have it, Joey. He just reminds me of the defensive backs who have succeeded in this secondary, and I think he's their number one guy at corner already. Caleb Patterson has been fully healthy. He's not as quick as Clark. Torrey Cox, I think, is a little bit better in man coverage because he's so sticky. He's not as long as Jaheim Clark. This guy is just kind of a combination of both of them, and I just think he gives them somebody who can compete against some of these X-wide receivers in the Big Ten.
Did any of us have Jaheim Clark as a sign guy?
No, because I thought he was like too established after the end of last year.
Yeah, I was just going through my signs, and I'm like, man, certainly someone took Jaheim Clark. I agree with everything that you said, and the immediate impact. Like there's so much about him that was an idea based on a really, really good closing stretch to the season. He missed the first 4 games and came in like he didn't. And I think that was where it's like, okay, 1, they trust him. 2, we can do it. And 3, they need him. They need Jaheim Clark because he is their best cornerback. He's got the length. He's got the twitchiness. He told me, he said, I think I got maybe a screw loose. Like, yeah, well, you just kind of play with that energy and that effort that Illinois had a lot of success with guys wired like that with those kind of physical traits. That's played pretty well for this team. And I think just the biggest thing with him, can he be your unlocker for man coverage? Can he be a guy that just you feel a little bit better? I'm not saying a full game. I'm not saying 2022 levels of man coverage, but can he be your guy that allows you to situationally play a little bit more man coverage? I think Torrey Cox on the other side can do that too, but Clark is that guy that maybe as this thing goes, Aaron Henry feels a little bit better about pulling that trigger and playing a little bit more man, which would allow you to dial up a little bit more heat on some of these quarterbacks.
And he's a guy, when he gets beat, I don't think it's going to affect him the next play. Some of these guys in the secondary right now, I wonder about that. This guy, no, never lacking for confidence. He's got that spoon quality. He's got that Xavier Scott quality where his confidence is never lacking, Joey. So I love what he brings, and you wish you had him all year because he's a difference maker. All right, number 3.
You say that, but I don't know that he doesn't change the Indiana game, right? So no. You're probably where you are record-wise. You just wish you had those snaps and those continuity to continue to build, but I think he's in store for a very big closing stretch to this season.
All right, number 3. What does this opportunity against number 1 Ohio State mean for Illinois, Joey?
Yes, everything, of course, right? You get the number 1 team coming to town. Big noon kickoff is back. Brett Bielema is encouraging everybody to show up, maybe a little drunk, maybe a lot of drunk, just be enough for the whole game. Like, they are putting a lot into this. We know they are from a recruiting standpoint. We know they are from just the big noon, all the atmosphere. Stupid thing, the weather's supposed to be really good.
Fall is
it is supposed to be. Oh God, he's so happy. Like all of those things, and Brett is really, 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 I think it's hard to miss, obviously, the way he's pushed for this fan base to deliver in ways that has been building, but to take it to a level that it probably hasn't been to yet. So you win this game, which is a huge task. And I don't know that, I know I'm not going to pick him. I would assume you also are not going to pick them. But if you win this game, you set yourself back on track. You're now in that playoff discussion again. And honestly, I think maybe the biggest thing about it, if they were to somehow win this game, that feels like you've created distance from the Indiana debacle. Like that, it doesn't completely wash that game away. You don't wash 53-point games away. But if you beat Ohio State, suddenly that's not one of the big talking points when you're playing a high caliber team. And you're just a little bit removed from that. And I think that's really, really a big deal to kind of rewrite the narrative of how this team performs against some of those games. Now, you can afford to lose this game and still be on a 9-win, a 10-win path. Washington is obviously a big struggle there. You cannot get blown out. You cannot have Indiana, a repeat of Indiana, of course, or even like a light repeat of Indiana. I think 30 points is like, what is going on here? But a win could set you up in a lot of meaningful ways. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain in this game. I know we're an Illinois podcast and people want us to pump up, the Illini's chances to win here. They're the number 17 in the country, team in the country. I think they're a good team.
They're about the team I expected, except maybe the run game not as good, the secondary not quite as good, the passing game better, right? Like the defensive front maybe a little better. So at the end of the day, like this is kind of what the team I thought they would be. Ohio State's better than I thought they would be. Their quarterback is way more poised and ready to do this than I thought he would be. And their defense, you knew they'd be talented. I didn't think they'd be this dominant at this point. ESPN's FPI gives Illinois a 17% chance to win. That's great. This is not like a death march. Like 2017, right. I didn't even go to the game, right? Because I was like, there's no chance that team that was worse than MAC teams has a chance to win at Ohio State. This team, if everything goes right and Ohio State shoots itself in the foot, they can win. So that is exciting. And you go to the game for these moments. You have this chance to do that, kind of like at Oregon last year. You went there, 6-1 at the time? 5-1, I can't remember what they were, but you were number 20 team in the country. You go to Oregon, you know they're better than you, but you have a chance, but you didn't play well. And you got blown out 38-9. That can happen. But the opportunity for this program that you have is, let's see what happens. We'll try to play our best. And if they screw up some things and we play our best football for a day, we can have a moment that not only lasts for this year and it makes a huge impact on this year, Joey, but lasts a lifetime, right? That is one of the biggest moments in Illinois history. But when it pertains to this year, if you win tomorrow, if you win on Saturday, you have an inside track at a college football playoff berth. You have, as you said, wiped away that Indiana game. And that's hard to do. You lost 53 points to Indiana, which was the number 19 team in the country. And I think Indiana is going to make the college football playoff here, but that's still just such a sore spot on your resume. I don't know if you can make up for that and a blowout loss to Ohio State, even if you win 10 games. USC is a great win. I think Duke's going to be a quality win. Washington would be a really quality win. Is that enough to get into the playoff? Even if you are the fourth team in the Big Ten and you get blown out by the other teams that are in the playoffs, that's going to hurt you. So I do think you have to at least show you can be competitive in this game. If you want to make a college football playoff, you still have to win the next 5 games and maybe win some of them handedly. But like you have to show that you can compete because they're not going to put in a team that loses by a combined 100 points to 2 playoff teams in the playoff. So huge opportunity, great opportunity for Illinois. You are a ranked team. I loved what Barry Lunny said about we made this kind of a thing like that. It's not just the number 1 team in the country coming. It's like, oh, the number 1 team's playing a ranked team. It's happened 3 times in Illinois history and twice in the last 2 years. That says a lot, I think, about the Big Ten that they've had 2 number 1 ranked teams the last couple of years, but also about Illinois being ranked because it says a lot about what Brett Bielema and his staff are building that, you actually feel like you have a chance, at least a small chance going into a game against number 1.
Yeah, this game has much less interest if Illinois is not a ranked team. If Illinois is, 5-1, if they're 3-2, obviously anything below that, of course, but they put themselves in a position to be attractive for Big Noon kickoff, to have people come back. It's Hall of Fame weekend. I would imagine there's going to be some pretty good, some recognizable names in Champaign, and this isn't. This doesn't even feel like I think back to 2 other wins just in my time on the beat. Maybe you've got another one in mind. This isn't even Penn State in 21. Like that did feel like you're going in there to get absolutely bowled over. Wisconsin in 2019. Those stats that Wisconsin had defensively in that game were bonkers. Like you didn't project that for Illinois to win that game. So those were much, much bigger long shots. Now, Ohio State is better than both of those teams, right? But just from a long shot standpoint, those were much different than this game where Illinois has at least established itself as a good football team with talented players, a ranked team. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's not as far-fetched as these games have been, even in Brett's tenure.
I'm kind of like the line at 14.5 right now. That's a sign of respect for Illinois, isn't it? Because Ohio State went to Washington and won by 18 points. And no one had won there in how many years? 3 years or something like that. And that's a pretty good offense. They held them to 6 points, barely let them in the red zone. So the fact that Illinois is, just a 14.5 point dog based on what happened with Indiana too, I think that is showing some respect that they have a chance here. But boy, you got to play well because this team is really, really good. All right, number 4. What does this game mean for Luke Altmaier, Joey?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Heisman moments, right? Everyone has a Heisman moment. I don't want to sit here and say if Illinois wins. One, if Illinois wins, Luke Altmaier is the star of the game. There's really no other way that they win this game without Luke Altmaier being the star of the game. You're not putting him as the front runner for the Heisman, but the guy's name might finally get thrown in the conversation. I mean, like his stats, his eye test far outproduce the amount of discussion about Luke Altmaier to this point in the season. I don't necessarily understand it, and I'm not even talking from a.
I think a lot has to do with the Indiana game. Like if that had been like a back and forth with him and Mendoza, right? If it's like a 35-31 Indiana win, I think people would be talking about Altmaier a little bit more. But losing 63-10, and Luke obviously getting sacked 7 times, didn't have much of a chance. I think that's clouding over it. But yeah, you great game here, even if it's in a close loss. Like people start talking about you a little more.
Yeah, you put yourself in that conversation because the stats are good. He's thrown for more than 1,500 yards, 13 touchdowns, 12 touchdowns. 12? I think it's 12 touchdowns. I typed 13. No interceptions. He's rushed for a couple of touchdowns, 74% of his passes. That's really, really good. The numbers put him in the stratosphere in college football among quarterbacks. You can, whatever you want to make it, 10, 15. He's in that conversation. He's top 5 nationally in a handful of stats. But you zoom out just a little bit. If Luke Altmaier can lead Illinois to a win against Ohio State, that's like legacy stuff at Illinois. That's probably what you have. Please, yes. Because it's juice. Like we're talking about juice, right? He's coming back this week. Go ahead.
He's already an all-time great for Illinois. This would make him an absolute legend. Like I think if he wins this game, and you're right, he would have to be unbelievable for Illinois to win this game. I think people are starting to talk about him as the greatest quarterback in Illinois history. I think that's the kind of moment that you have. Like Juice Williams, his last 2 years did not go all that great, not all because of him, but it didn't go all that great, but he'll always have that Ohio State moment, right? Like always has that game. Luke's had a phenomenal career here at Illinois, but this would take it to another level. I do want to mention this, though. Against top 10 teams, he's not played well. Right? It has not been productive. And, of course, it's not all on him. When you have no time, and that's a concern going into this game, it's hard to be an effective quarterback. Against top 10 teams, Penn State 2023, 15 of 28, 163 yards, 4 interceptions. Penn State 2024, 16 of 25, 185 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Oregon 2024, 17 of 35, 161 yards, 2 interceptions. I thought those were uncharacteristic, him trying to do something more than he needed to do. Indiana wasn't a top 10 team this year, but he was 14 of 22, 146 yards and a touchdown. So his other 3 top 10 games, 48 of 88, 509 yards, 1 touchdown, 7 interceptions. If you even just take the 2 games last year against top 10 teams, because he was a much better quarterback in year 2 than year 1, right? 31 of 60, 348 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. It's a chance for him to show he can do it against a great team, even you're going to get pressure on you at some point. So it's going to be hard for Luke because the team across from him is better than the team that's protecting him and running routes and all that. But man, if he can lift him and he can give him a chance in this game, just give him a chance in the fourth quarter, right? And Luke's going to have a chance to do something special. And that's what you hope as an Illinois fan is in the fourth quarter, it's close. So you force Julian Sand to do something he hasn't had to do yet as a starting quarterback. I think he's capable of doing it. Against Texas, I think his defense was basically carrying him, but he made some plays in that one. And then for Illinois, we know what our guy can do in a close game in the fourth quarter when he's got confidence.
Yeah, get your guy to the fourth quarter, see what's there. The top 10 stats, those are really good stats. Again, you go back to a previous comp when you're just backed up until like the teams know you're throwing it. That's a tall task. So, Luke Altmaier is going to have to make some throws. They've got to be able to
run the ball.
At least, run the ball, stand on some decent footing for this game, and give that guy a chance to go be as good as he is.
Well, let's dive into that. Number 5. How should Barry Lunny Jr. attack the best? Should say defense, best defense in the country right now? 5 points per game. Ohio State is allowing, Joey, which is ridiculous. The stat that blows my mind: 8 red zone opportunities in 5 games for Ohio State opponents. They've given up no red zone touchdowns. They haven't given up a touchdown since their 3rd game. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, that's bonkers. Probably bought into the Illinois offensive line as a rushing offensive line a little bit too early last week, and that didn't translate particularly great against Purdue. But I think this is one of those games that you've got to pass to set up the run, and you've got to let your short passing game see if you can carry that to be an extension of your run game. I love the idea. I mentioned it earlier of Caden Fagan out getting some of those and just making him fall forward with a little bit more space to do so, right? Because he's a big guy and he can do that. It's tough because Ohio State's really good, and Arvell Reese is a freak show. He is unbelievable. Caleb Downs is unbelievable. Like, those two guys are as good at their positions as any other defensive player in the country. It's like that's difficult, but if you can find a way to let that pass set up the run, particularly in some of those short routes, see if Hank Beatty can get a few extra yards to lighten up a little bit of that box, to give Khalil Valentine, Caden Fagan, we will see about Aiden Lawfrey, a little bit more of a window to run. But I don't know that this is a game you want to come out and try to force the issue running the ball. I want to see a little bit of what we saw, frankly, early on against Indiana, where they did pass to set it up a little bit and see what you can do from there. But you gotta not fall into an obvious passing deficit, and then all bets are kind of off there.
Yeah, it's got to be the quick passing game, right? You got to negate this pass rush a little bit, because I texted you earlier in this week looking at the Ohio State 2-deep defensive line. It's all 4- and 5-star guys, like just dude after dude that they can rotate in. So, but their secondary is great too. They got the 2 best linebackers in the country potentially. It's definitely the best linebacking group. I mean, Sonny Styles is a top 50 NFL draft pick. They got great corners. So it's really, really difficult, but like just some rhythm throws, those quick passes to Colin Dixon for 5 yards. Like, I am not upset if they get the tight ends and running backs involved for an extension of the run game. We haven't seen a lot of that this year of, some rollouts to Tanner Arkin for 4 yards. That's a nice win on 1st or 2nd down, right? To set you up to where you can get converted on 3rd down. You got to stay on the field. Barry Loney's just got to find a way to stay on the field to keep Ohio State's offense off this eat up clock. That's how Illinois beat Ohio State in 2007. But some of those short passes might open up that running game a little bit, because I do think Khalil Valentine and Caden Fagan can compete here. They can get some yards. You want your offensive line to be firing off the ball and be physical. They're out talented probably, but if they can bring a mentality that gets you some wins, get 100 yards rushing, I would consider that a win against this Ohio State defense. And then get Luke Altmaier involved in the running game a little bit. It's going to be difficult, but you just got to find a way to stay on the field. So I don't really have a great answer of how to attack, but I do think it's quick, get the ball out, and just gain some confidence early. And then, Joey, at some point, you're going to have to bring out the bag of tricks. Like, you're going to have to surprise Ohio State to cause some bust for them. And Barry Loney's been pretty good at that so far this year with Hank Beatty. Caden Fagan gives you an option that you can do something like that. So at some point, you're going to have to do that. And you're going to have to be aggressive on 4th down. Like 4th down and 2 from your own 50 or from the 50-yard line, probably going to have to go for it in this game, because you need to stay on the field.
Yeah, I agree on all that. They have Luke Altmaier's legs written down. I would like to see them tap into that a little bit more this game. I also wrote down tempo is not your friend in this game. It is. I know how comfortable Luke Altmaier is in that. I know how much of a topic of conversation that has understandably been in that. No, thank you in this game. Like that is recipe to put a defense that I think is going to struggle against this Ohio State offense out there too much. And that's, I don't know, that's necessarily the answer, but I do like your idea of getting into the bag of tricks a little bit more. We'll see what that looks like, but 4 yards is a win, man. And however you got to get there, maybe this is a Tanner Arkin, maybe this is a Cole Rusk type of situation where you can let that get going, but try to stay on. Now, we don't say like run the play clock from 40 to 2 on every play, right? Because you do want to play with some rhythm. You do want to play with the sense of urgency, but that tempo, that hurry up, I'm thinking probably not this game.
Yeah, Ohio State runs zone about 2/3 of the time. So I do think that allows you potentially some screen passes, potentially some of these short rhythm throws with Hank Beatty, Colin Dixon, Hudson Clement, some guys who are really smart that understand that. So that's my biggest thing. You just got to get that ball out quickly. I don't know how many tackles you're going to bust against this defense, but just taking 5-6 yards, that's a win. So, all right, number 6, Joey, let's wrap it up. This is probably a harder question. Should Aaron Henry approach Ohio State's offense?
Look, I actually have a simple answer. It's a challenging question because good luck, really, right? I mean, just the way this Ohio's, not only do they have really talented players, they got a bunch of them. It's not like you're going up against like, oh, they got a freak show receiver. They got 2 of them in Max Clare who killed you last year for Purdue. Do what you do better. We know who you are. We know what you want to do. You want to limit explosive plays. You got to do that better. That means wrapping up better. Get the guys down, tackle, communicate better. Your veteran defensive backs can't be blowing those coverages like that. I know how simple that is, but if this is who you're going to be defensively, you need to do it at a really, really high level to make it actually make sense and work. Otherwise, you're just playing a really conservative defense that's susceptible to breaking, and that's not the answer in any game, and it's sure not the answer against Ohio State. And then selectively, I've used that term a few times, intermittently, can you dial up some man? Can you dial up some heat and let your pass rush try to get home a little bit? I do like that the disguising. Like, that is the thing that Illinois had a lot of success with, is confused quarterbacks. That's kind of an extension of their pass rush, right? That disguising where maybe you're not blitzing, but the quarterback's got to take a second. And that second is Gabe Ackes' time. It's James Thompson's, Johnny Newton, whoever it's been. But if you're not tackling on the back end, Illinois has allowed 6 plays of 40 or more yards this year and 11 of 30 or more. That's a lot as it is. You factor in Ohio State has 12 plays of 40 or more yards, 15 of 30 or more yards. That's disaster, especially against their skill position. Of Ohio State's 12 plays of 40 or more yards, 10 have come through the air. And of its 15 of plays of 30 or more yards, 12 have come through the air. Illinois' 6 plays allowing 40 or more yards, 4 have come through the air, and 8 of its 11 of 30 more yards have come through the air. That makes sense, right? Because typically you're going to chunk some of those big plays with passes. But we've seen, like, the eye test tells us those have been busted coverages and missed tackles.
Yeah.
And this is not the team to do that against.
That's been the frustration with me, and the Aaron Henry discourse. Sometimes I've just kind of shaken my head at it. I get the criticism of this defense right now. I totally do. But when you watch the film, it is like a blown assignment by Miles Scott and Matthew Bailey. It's missed tackles by those guys, or Malachi Hood, who they've had to bench at times because he hasn't been consistent enough as a tackler. I get why he's scheming the way he is. And I think that's the scheme you have to run against Ohio State is keep everything in front of you and tackle, but you need to tackle. And so I don't know what the answer of that is mid-season other than teaching, continue to preach on it, all of those things. So I don't think this is all of a sudden, let's get aggressive. Let's go 6-man blitzes and go mano-a-mano against Carnell Tate and Max.
No, because what you have to lose becomes a very lopsided and ugly game at home. Like, that's what you have to lose is just vibes.
So what they have to do about it, they just have to, I totally agree with you, Joey. They have to do what they are schemed to do better, which is wrap up and tackle. I think I don't want to see 12, 15-yard cushions against these guys. I do think you got to have 2 deep safeties if you want to do that. Obviously, it opens up the running game, but like you need to have a little bit of a cushion, but then you got to tackle those guys. Like, so to give Jeremiah Smith 5 yards to run into you or run around you, like that's not going to be a win. But I do think that's what they have to do. I think you got to try and make them go 10, 12 plays, hope they make a mistake. Sometimes Ohio State doesn't, but you got to do your best to wrap up Jeremiah Smith, which is really hard. Carnell Tate can really get over top of you. They just stress you in so many ways, but you got to find a way to keep them in front of you and get takeaways. Like that is the biggest thing. They are not intercepting the ball whatsoever. Julian Saint is incredibly accurate. He reminds me a lot of Tommy DeVito, watching him, poise, accuracy, all that. Just kind of physically built like him too. But it's a huge task, but I think he's got to do what he's been doing, which is zone it up most of the time. They just got to execute better, Joey. So I know Aaron Henry deserves criticism with the way the defense is playing, but I don't know if there's a big scheme change coming here.
I don't think there is this game. I did want to branch out and ask you if you think during that open week that they try to do anything different, or is that you get Washington coming out of that, right? So I don't know that that's even the best approach, and I don't know.
You're going to want to have Demon Williams Jr. You're going to want to contain him like you did Sellers, like you did Jalen Daniels. So I think it's going to be the same game plan. Once you get to some of these other teams in the back, the four, I think that's when you might run man coverage, 40, 50% of the time, right?
Yeah, that's probably where you flirt with a little bit more aggression. I wholeheartedly.
Quarterback in Washington, Wisconsin's quarterbacks are terrible. Northwestern's quarterback is terrible.
Yeah. You talked about the S&P and the efficiency numbers, and that's an incredibly good point. And I agree with all of that. Like, they have gone up against very, very, very good offenses. It's just the way, like, the eye test hasn't been there with the missed tackles and the blown assignments. You can, the way they gave up yards to USC, I get that. I'm not saying you should strive to give Mekhi Lemon 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns, but I think you saw what they are, and you saw what they do. Same thing at Duke. You saw what they are. You saw what they do. They limited the missed tackles. They limited the bust. You get a little fortunate with some takeaways at Duke, or you create the takeaways, however you want to look at it. But if that goes, I'm saying you should hope if they give up 400 yards, don't sweat it. But if they're not busting, if they're not missing tackles like that, you can see how I guess the base of this would work. I just think you have to rely on takeaways too.
You might have given up 14 points to Purdue, right? And you would have felt pretty dang good about that game. This one will certainly be different. I think I loved what Ryan Walters did when that aggressive of a defense. I love it. I love imposing your will against another team and just being aggressive, rushing the passer, going man-to-man, forcing college quarterbacks to throw into tight windows. You don't have that secondary anymore to do that. And that could be the criticism, is you haven't had the talent there following Devin Witherspoon, all those guys that Lovie Smith recruited here. You haven't had the talent quite to do that. And, a guy like Vernon Woodward, I would have thought would have, been one of those guys. Jaheim Clark has turned out to be one of them. So I love that style of defense, but you just don't have those guys. And then, Joey, you are going against quarterbacks that can make those throws, that can make those NFL open throws. The Big Ten's quarterbacks are insane right now. And you've played all of them, like Mendoza, Maeva, now Sayin. Demon Williams Jr. isn't as good. Like the quarterbacks you're playing at the back end, the guys you're playing now can make those NFL window throws. And it's been really difficult. You saw it with Tanner Heckel against Mekhi Lemon, like phenomenal throws by Maeva. They got the ones to the tight end. So the guys you're going up against, I get why they're scheming the way they are.
Yeah, and to the point about Ryan Walters and that 2022 defense, when you're talking about teams who generally recruit in the same talent, within certain standard deviations of talent-wise in that, recruiting rankings that fall somewhere between 28 and 40, right? Or however that looks. That's the exception. 2022 is the exception. It's not the exception for the top 5 or 10% of college football in terms of talent acquisition. You could turn on some of those big shot programs in college football and say, oh, well, they're doing this. They've got the talent to do it. But for the most part, that was a perfect storm of a secondary, and just where Illinois is going to fall year over year in terms of raw talent. They develop very well. We know that. You're not going to be able to do what 2022 did. That was lightning in a bottle, and it worked so stinking well because you had that secondary. So I just and
it didn't work well next year for Illinois with different personnel, and it didn't work
for Purdue. Yeah. So I just that. If you keep going back to 20, and I'm not saying you, but broadly, if you keep going back to 2022, dude, that's the exception for programs in this window.
I do think if this is the new way, and I think Aaron's very open-minded about what you got to do, the changes. Sometimes my thought that's been percolating in my head is does he have these guys thinking too much? Are they not playing free enough? Brett has mentioned some things maybe we got to simplify some things. So maybe that's what he's got to figure out here. But if this is the new scheme, which the last 2 years has been, which is keep everything in front, limit explosives, get some takeaways, you give up some yards, but you don't give up as many points. It worked last year, not quite as well this year outside of the Duke game. You got to be more sound at it. You got to, what makes Phil Parker great is no, everyone knows what they're running at Iowa, but they are so good at technique, so sound that it's really difficult to score points on them. That's the next step. Like his guys got to be masters at this, and we're not seeing that right now.
Yeah, this reminds me of you're not going to want to hear this, the glory days of the Aaron Rodgers era in Green Bay.
Yeah.
I like watching press conferences, right? And I like to hear what people say, and I like to hear how it's anyway. He always talked about, and you could almost sense not a frustration, but it was there. Teams would just too high safety him because it was better to let him try to pick apart underneath than to risk going over the top. And that's what Illinois is doing. That is trickling into college football, where yes, you could get pressure on opposing quarterbacks, and college quarterbacks aren't always friendly in the face of pressure.
Right.
But you also risk that over the top. So this is such a risk-averse defense when it's done right, and it's not a totally new or organic idea. Like I watched this happen when the Packers would play virtually everybody during the heyday there. It's just that's where you get hurt ideally the least amount possible. And then you make teams, one, not get bored with the easy stuff underneath, and two, execute play over play, play over play, play over play. But as we've mentioned before, it also leaves you for play over play, play over play, for busts, for missed tackles, for teams just to make an awesome throw and catch like you saw in the fourth quarter against USC.
All right, let's go to our picks to click. Joey, last week we did not do well at all of these. You picked the offensive line. I picked Hudson Clement. Picked click defense. You had Dylan Rosiak. Oh, that one works. And then Gabe Akis. Gabe had a good game, so our defensive picks were a little bit better. Pick to click offense. Joey, who you got?
Are we just going to stay with Luke Altmaier? Because it has to be Luke Altmaier. There's just no way, because you take picks to click and the event, like what clicks in a win is kind of what you're saying here. It's Luke Altmaier. This is his moment to come out and make a statement and show that he can do this against an Ohio State defense that's really good. And their front four and their band of blue chippers is a nightmare to deal with. It just is. And Luke Altmaier is going to have to deal with pressure in his face, and he's probably going to take sacks, and maybe that turnover streak comes to an end because Ohio, you're going to have to force the issue at times. You're going to be under pressure at times. But I don't know how this answer is anything other than Luke Altmaier.
Well, since you took him, I will take Justin Bullock. I think you need a guy that probably can win a one-on-one battle, and he's 6'5". And I think Luke Altmaier, in the face of pressure, is just going to throw it up for that guy. He's the one, like obviously Hank Beatty, he trusts implicitly, and he'll throw it in a tight window with Colin Dixon. But just to throw it up and hope my guy goes and gets it, I think that's Justin Bullock. So I think he's going to target him a little bit more. I think they're going to play him. Maybe he gets a deep shot or two with Hank Beatty getting all the attention from Ohio State. So I'm going to go with Justin Bullock in this one. Pick to quick defense, Joey. Who you got?
Oh boy. Yeah, this was a lot more difficult, but I'm going to go with, I bought in a little early last week on the offensive line. So this might be a buy low pick to click here with Matthew Bailey, but I'm going to take Matthew Bailey. He is so much better of a football player than what he put on the field at Purdue last week. He has proven that he's entirely better than what you saw this. So I like the way he's wired too. There's a lot of, I hate doing this every time, and I've even told him, I'm sorry we keep doing this. A lot of Sidney Browns in the way that he is wired about things. You get another shot at Max Clare, and he crushed Illinois last season, 133 receiving yards. He's a tough matchup on a not very good Purdue team. He's an even tougher matchup on an Ohio State team that's just got absolute monsters. Aaron Henry describes this offense like he's describing the Monstars in Space Jam, right? But I think Matthew Bailey's the guy who's going to wear those struggles in the right way. I don't know what clicking looks like because I think Max Clare can still get his, and I think Ohio State is going to obviously be able to move the ball. I believe in that guy to have it bounce back.
Throw a lot of short passes so far this season, kind of in Matthew Bailey land. So it would not surprise me if Matthew Bailey's around a pass that he can pick off, and he's got to make that play. I'm going to go with the guy I was talking about earlier, James Clark. I just think if it's Gabe Akis, if it's Dylan Rosiak's making plays right now, I think Leon Lowry's playing pretty well. Bailey can make those kind of game-changing plays. Otherwise, James Clark is that kind of guy. And I think he's going to relish this opportunity to go against Jeremy Smith and Carnell Tate. I don't think he's going to be scared about it. Like, there might be some guys in that defensive back room who are nervous. I don't think Jaheim Clark is. I think he's just wired, as he said, he's got to screw us. So he's excited about this opportunity. He's an ultimate competitor. And I don't know if it's an interception or a couple pass breakups, but I do think Jaheim Clark's going to show up and make some plays. Like, I just have a confidence in him because he's got such a swagger and confidence about himself.
You know, one of my favorite things he said when we talked to him last week, he said, if a guy makes a catch, I'm going to talk. And if I make a stop, I'm going to talk. And I like that, right? Like, okay, get a catch on. He doesn't care. Now, you break up a pass, like literally everybody's going to know about it. The way he is wired is what you want in a cornerback. Like, it's very Creed Bratton. He doesn't give an F about nothing, and he doesn't. And there's something so cool about that. And the best corners have that attitude. And I'm not trying to put him in any comparative land he doesn't belong in at this point in his career, but he's got the approach that I think makes for successful quarterbacks.
All right, Joey. Bold prediction, Illinois offense. What do you got?
So I had one written down. If I were to guess a special teams fake, does that fit in the offense or defense? Okay, I am workshopping that idea, and I do feel like if any time it would be now, but I'm going to stick with what I initially had. Hudson Clement's going to lead this team in receiving yards against Ohio State. I like the short pass idea. I like, for him, the fact that I think Hank Beatty is going to deservedly get a lot of attention. I think Colin Dixon is deservedly going to get a lot of attention. Against some teams in the Big Ten, you wonder who's the third defensive back who's going to cover Hudson Clement. You don't really worry about that with Ohio State because they're going to have a 4 or 5 star. But I do think this could set up, you talk about a team that runs zone, Hudson Clement knows where to get, to just be able to get a catch against some zone. I'm going to take him to, I don't know what that number is going to be, but I'm going to have him leading the team.
Is this bold enough for you?
No.
6+ combined catches by running backs and tight ends for Illinois. That's pretty bold, isn't it? Do I need to up that by 1?
No, no, I don't think so. But here's the thing. The tight ends have been in like 0 to 1 land for 3
That's right.
weeks.
That's why, and like the running backs, maybe 2, 3, 4, like something like that. Maybe, I mean, last week it was 3 for Caden. Cleo dropped his. I'll go 7. I'll go 7 just to make it a little bit more bold. I think you got to get those guys involved. Like, I think you got to make an extension of the run game through the passing game. And I think the tight ends on rollouts, running backs, just releasing a little bit earlier. I think you got to get those guys involved just to get some easy gains that can set you up for better second and third down.
Well, now my bold prediction doesn't feel all that bold. Oh, this guy's going to lead the team in receiving yards. Boy, really way to go out on a limb. Werner's out here trying to predict stuff that we haven't seen in all season.
That's right. Defense, Joey, what's your bold prediction?
Oh, goodness.
I could have just offensive prediction, by the way. Illinois, the first team to score in the teens against Ohio State, which I do think they will be.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm going to have Tomiwa Durjaye with the sack and 2 tackles for loss.
Okay.
That feels very bold. When we talk about a weakness, and I know you had this in Know the Foe, when you're talking about a weakness against Ohio State, it's relative. Mm-hmm. It just is. And that's what the best team. But if there's a way that you could find maybe some ground against Ohio State, their center, right guard, right tackle has allowed 14 combined pressures. Listen, that's not a lot, but that's more than the left side has. So can Tomiwa Durjaye be disruptive from that side? I mean, maybe that opens up for James Thompson or an edge rusher. He's a guy who's he belongs athletically. He's got the tools. You've seen it start to blossom. He knocked the Purdue center flat down last week. It was really, really loud with him because he played so well early, gotten a little bit more quiet. It just feels like he's due to have that game. And I do believe he's got the talent to get there.
Yeah. And their running game's been, good for an FBS team. It hasn't been great for Ohio State. So I do think they can disrupt that a little bit, and they need to. They need to force some third and longs here. All right. I'm just maybe buying kind of a little bit of your Bailey. I'm buying a Miles Scott bounce back game. So I'm going to have a Miles Scott takeaway. I don't think he's going to have, mental errors, missed tackles like that again. So I'm just going to go Miles Scott with a takeaway to give Illinois maybe some early momentum in this game.
Just perhaps like in the middle of the field in a certain
area that's nicknamed.
Certain area that's been nicknamed. I'm just curious how you kind of envision this happening. I like that though. But obviously you've got to get takeaways against this Ohio State.
How many?
One, you've got to.
It's got to be at least 3, right? At least 3.
Yeah, I mean, the back follow-up question is how many busted coverage or missed tackles they have. Because if it's a lot, then you're talking 4, and if it's a little bit, then I think you could get by with 2 or 3, probably 3. I like the Miles Scott bounce back. Those safeties are just better than what they played last week. That was so uncharacteristic of what they've done. I am with you. The bust on that corner blitz, I don't put that at Miles Scott. That was a Matthew Bailey mistake. And so I think it's better than that. I like the bounce back for Miles Scott. And that position you got to get back to that position being a takeaway machine. You've got to get there. But as we talk about the macros, you can't sacrifice reliability either. That's kind of a catch-22 at that position. You need the reliability, but you also need to have those takeaways.
Yeah, because we saw Matt Crusadich really struggle against Indiana when Miles Scott went out. But Miles Scott had bad moments against Purdue, and Matthew Bailey had some bad moments against Purdue. Can't have those. Because that's why those guys are in. They're not the best athletes on the team, right? If you were just going the best athletes, maybe it's Sabor, Kareem, and Matt Crusadich, and it's safety, right? But you have the reliability. You have, really smart, instinctual players who know what you're doing. Got to make sure you're on your P's and Q's there.
Can I run an idea by you?
Yeah, final thoughts.
I'm thinking beyond this year. So this is probably not the best spot for this. Sabor Kareem had moved to that strong safety, that Matthew Bailey role. He's also the dime safety. And any single time I see a dime safety, I think that's a pathway to a free safety at some point. I wonder if they go back to that, not because of Matt Crusadich in one game against Indiana, because Sabor Kareem's length, because his what I would assume would be growing reliability. And I also think you're collecting a group of boundary safeties that could really be that next, the heir apparent to Matthew Bailey. Whenever Matthew Bailey is done at Illinois, I just wonder if because that's kind of how we envision Sabor Kareem is that free safety. I do wonder if that over time is a pivot back, because you have a Zanai Scott, who I know obviously he's playing on special teams, right? He's kind of that guy in the conversation. Andre Levette, special teams to defense is a real thing. So just keep his name in mind. I don't know. It's just something I've been kind of kicking around a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting in the offseason how that safety position goes, because Tanner Heckle could play some free safety too, but they seem to have him locked in at that star role. So I would imagine he's going to continue to be that. So he's a guy that really intrigues me because he does have the skill set to just be a great center fielder. But so does Crusadich, right? And he's been banged up the last couple of weeks. So I still think Sabor in that strong safety role, but you got to get more guys who look like Jaheim and look like Sabor, right? The length, the athleticism, those guys are really talented guys. And that's why the class of 2026 really excites me, because I think your 2 best prospects in that class, along with Nasir Rankin, and Nasir can play defensive back too, is Jacob Eberhardt is a stud prospect at boundary safety. Nick Hankins is a dude at corner, and they need more guys that look like that or that kind of athleticism. So I'm really excited about what they're adding at defensive back. And in 2026, I think some of those guys can make a pretty early impact, even if they have to go through some growing pains there. Any final thoughts on Ohio State, Illinois, Joey? It's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough.
It's going to be tough. And I'm sure this podcast didn't make anyone I'm just trying to be real, right? This is a really tough. This is an Ohio State team that's obviously back in the college football playoff.
It can happen.
You're going to see deep in it. It can happen. It's a tough game. This is a super, super talented Ohio State team, and I just think the way that those receivers match up against a secondary that I'm not feeling very good about the eye test of it right now. That concerns me a great deal.
Yeah, because Jeremiah Smith is like Julio Jones level. Good.
At what point do the Big Ten coaches go to whoever they need to go to and be like, hey, listen, we should probably let this guy just go. Ryan Day is going to be like, oh, no, he's like cutting tires so they can't get to the meeting. Like, at what point do you say, hey, we should just let him go to the NFL? There's more money to be made in the NFL. It's fair to him. With his Big Ten coaches just looking out for the long term, Jeremiah Smith, letting him go right to the NFL.
And Carnell Tate's not bad either. And just loaded team. That's what a national championship caliber team looks like. But hey, on one Saturday, we'll see what can happen. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. If you're watching there, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell. For Patrick Murphy, for Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Warner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer podcast.